I was actually brought onto the project as an author. I was right out of the 10th grade, and uh, yeah. So I was brought onto the project as an author. I was right out of the 10th grade. It was my summer vacations, actually, when I was contacted about it. And I was contacted by my principal, my old principal from my previous school, who was a friend of Miss Penumarthy's. And she'd recommended me to her for my skills in writing. So that was how I was brought onto the project. Now, I wasn't really a historian before this, but I did know how to tell a story. So that was, I mean, my initial contribution to the project. But then as it went on, obviously, I got a lot more involved with the content of the book that we were writing. And I think in the end, both the content and the style of the book was something I was heavily invested in, and I think what we've done has turned out pretty great.
What about you, Ayur?
So I grew up in England, London, and we come back here a lot, but I never really known the history of India under Imperial Britain, and honestly, I've been shocked at some English politicians who seem to yearn for the days of the empire, and I thought that it was important that people should know the history of India and how it got its independence and how really India was treated under the British Empire. So we thought that it was important that people should know this, but also that it should be accessible for everyone. So we thought, and as my mum has been saying, an hour is perfect to get a decent amount of depth in, but also to make it so that people can get through the whole thing in one sitting, so that it doesn't get too long and people don't get bored.
So what were the challenges that you actually faced? I know I asked you earlier too about the other audiobook, but what about this one?
So I think the main challenge was obviously condensing it all into an hour. Indian independence it's a massive timeline. A lot of things happened for India to go from being conquered by the British to gaining our independence. And I think since that's the obvious problem, I'll talk about another, which is the aim of a historian and obviously ourselves of remaining unbiased when we were telling the story. Now, there are many incidences that happen throughout the history of Indian independence that they're very hard to tell from one standpoint, like an Indian standpoint or a British standpoint, and that's, I think, where the matter of perspective comes in. And our job was to essentially provide a view of events, not as we think they should have happened or our perspective of them, but rather as they happened, and giving the reader an opportunity to form their own opinion on the implications of the events that happened was, I think, something that we tried to do here. That was a challenge, and I think we did rather well with that.
You did really rather very well. Ayur, what about you? Any challenges?
So similarly, obviously condensing it, and with the narration there wasn't as many challenges because there weren't too many characters to do. We didn't have to do voices for them, but it was which parts to tell and which parts to leave out, not just in condensing it, but in that there were so many events that we couldn't possibly get through all of them. So there were some very important people that we had to leave out, such as Subhash Chandra Bose, but we didn't really have an option. So.